Welcome to Power BI Desktop for Accountants. Yes, this is going to be an introduction to Power BI Desktop to build dashboards. Now, if you want to download this file or any of the text files or the finished Power BI Desktop file so you could follow along, click on the link below the video. Hey, this is the third video in the 2017 Washington Association of Accountants and Tax Preparers Tacoma Accounting Conference. Our first two videos are here, but our third video is going to be about Power BI Desktop. Now, if you've ever wondered what Power BI Desktop is, this is the video for you. We're going to cover all of these topics, which will give you an introduction to all the different topics. We're going to have an introduction to Power BI Desktop, how to open and save a file, import and append multiple text files, clean data, import Excel tables, and we will see a bunch of DAX formulas, including the DAX calendar table function to create a date table. We'll create calculated columns for our calendar table, and we'll see the functions month, format, and year. We'll create relationships, create two different reports in Dashboard across tabulated report. We'll see show values as in Power BI Desktop. We'll create this dashboard, and over here we'll see how to create a DAX measure, and then we'll see how to use column and bar charts as a slicer for our dashboard. We'll see the dashboard interactivity, and then we'll add new data and see that everything updates. Now, before we come over to this sheet right here, the process, and look at the whole process, I want to look at the end result, because many of you are like, why would I ever want to use Power BI Desktop when I have Excel? Well, let's go look at the finished file, and here's why. We have category and product, revenue, cost of goods sold, profit, and gross profit percentage. We have a bar chart with all of our products, and down here are categories. And watch this. I don't know how to do this over in Excel. If I click on the beginner category, everything is dynamic and interactive. There are the actual detailed numbers in the sorted list of product by revenue. We can see the beginner profits and how much revenue there is for each one of the products. And down here, we see the total beginner amount. If I click on intermediate, it's totally dynamic. Click off to the side in the white area, and instantly everything comes back. Now, if I wanted to see just the Bellin, there's just the Bellin. Over here, I can see within that category how much it is. Click in the white, everything is back to normal. That is amazing. Now, there's some other reasons we might want to use Power BI Desktop, but if you're an Excel user, even if you have your data in Excel, bring it over to Power BI Desktop, and you can make these amazing visualizations. Now, let's go back over to that first Excel sheet. I want to talk about what is Power BI Desktop. Well, first off, it's a free download. So all of you, you just go type into Google Power BI Desktop. It downloads and installs very quickly, and you will have it. You can see down here, down in my taskbar, I have an icon for Power BI Desktop. In essence, it is a dashboard visualization reporting tool. It combines all of these things from over in Excel. It combines Power Query, the Power Pivot data model, and DAX formulas all in one tool. It's different than Excel in that it provides a more rich and interactive way to visualize information. And if you have really big data, Power BI Desktop runs much more efficiently and quickly, not only in terms of calculating the formulas, but updating data than Excel does. Now, let's go over to the sheet process. Now, this is similar to the last video we did for this conference, where we did many of these steps in Power Query in Excel. We are going to have the same first steps, but it's going to be a lot different over in Power BI Desktop. We will take 3 different text files in a folder. We will import them, clean them, and transform them into a single table. Then we're going to import an Excel file. And for us in Power BI Desktop, we'll actually create a date table. And then learning about relationships and DAX formulas, we'll create 1 and 2 visualization dashboards over in Power BI Desktop. And then, of course, the kicker is once we get new data, we'll simply drop it into our original folder over here, click refresh, and everything will update. Now, our first step before we do anything is to go and open Power BI Desktop. Now, again, you have to download this. It is free. And actually, there are multiple versions, but the free download provides plenty of free visualizations for us Excel users. I'm going to click on Power BI Desktop. There it is. It's opening. Now, Power BI Desktop, another thing that's different is that it will update every single month with new features. Right here it says what's new. If you haven't updated it, it will give you a reminder. I'm going to close this. Now here it is, Power BI Desktop. Over on the very left, this is where we click to get a white blank screen to create our dashboard or report. We click here to see any tables. We don't have any tables. And we click here to see relationships. I go back up to the reporting. We will use these visualizations. Our fields will be listed here, and we'll drag and drop fields just like a pivot table. Up here, here's the Home ribbon tab. Right there, Get Data, that's Power Query. Over here, Modeling, this is where we create either a new table function, a new column for our table, or a new measure. Those are the three different types of DAX formulas. Now, the first thing we want to do is I'm going to import an Excel table. We want to be sure and go down and close this file, because on the product table right there, I need to import this. So I'm going to close the file. It has to be closed to import. And now we're going to use Power Query, but over here in Power BI Desktop, Get Data, the dropdown. And there it is right at the top. I can click Excel. It's asking me where that file is. I've saved mine right here, so I'm going to double click. Just like Power Query, here's a dialog box. And the only item we want is the table dProduct. That was an official Excel table over there. You know that it's an Excel table because that little blue line. We could see a preview. I definitely want to click Edit, not Load. Just like we did in our last video, we always wanted to check. This is very similar, many of the same buttons as over in Power Query and Excel. I see I have two columns. They both have the text data type right there. I can see if I needed to change it, I would just click that. That's the same dropdown as over in Power Query and Excel. That's a fine name. These steps are fine. So now we want to close and apply. It's working. Now if I go over to Table View, there's our first table. Over on the right, I could see the name of the table and the field. If I go over to Report View, the table will be there, and I can drag and drop. Now our next stop is to use Power Query to go get those text files. Now let's go look at those text files. You have to download this folder here, and these are different text files than our last video. If I double click, there's a Start folder and an Add Later. If I double click Start, what we need to import are the text files, 15, 16, and 17. Notice there's a bunch of other files in here. Power Query will make it easy to filter out any files we do not want. Now let's look at one of these files. Notice it's .txt. That means it's tab delimited. If I double click to open it, a delimiter simply means the character that separates each one of these columns in each one of the elements for each record. Date, product ID category, units, revenue, cost of goods sold, and profit. Now I'm going to close this, and we want to notice one thing. There's a capital .txt and a lowercase. Now most of the time we have the lowercase, but since Power Query is case sensitive, we need to take into consideration that both extensions might exist. Now this is the Start folder, and we only have 3 years. Let's go back, and I'm going to double click Add Later. Later we'll copy 18 and 19 back and drop it into the Start folder, and everything will instantly update. That's one of the amazing things of both Power Query and then Power Query and Power BI Desktop. Now let's go back over to Power BI Desktop. Get external data. Get data, that's our Power Query. I don't see From folder, but no problem. Notice here in Power BI Desktop they have that one button. But if I click More, Then I have the Get Data dialog box and all of these categories which we would find over in the Power Query Get and Transform ribbon in Excel. But the All option here, we have all of the different import options we might want. Now I'm going to click From Folder because we want Power Query to point to that Start folder. Click Connect. Browse. Now we want to make sure and point to the Start folder. Just like in our last video, when we tell Power Query or Power BI Desktop to import from that folder, everything in that folder, even later when we drag new things into there, will be imported. I'm going to click OK. Click OK. We do not want to click Combine or Load. We want to click Edit and get to the Query Editor. And here's our list of different files we can import. Over here, that is not a good name, since this name is going to be the name of the query, and it's going to be our final table over in Power BI Desktop. I'm going to call this something like All Sales Tables Combined, and Enter. Now, if we look, each one of the files has some attributes. The only column we need to manipulate is the extension column. That means we need to filter out what we don't want. And then content is the column over here that has, for each one of the text files, the actual data. So we want to come over here, and the first thing we need to do is convert all of the extensions to lowercase. I select Extensions. I can go to Transform, over to the text column and Format and lowercase, or I can simply right-click that column header, Transform and lowercase. Now, unlike Power Query, in Power Query we automatically see each one of the steps. If you wanted to go look at the code that's being written, you'd go over to View, click Advanced Editor, and there's the M code that's being written. Now, that's beyond the scope of this video here. And not only that, but for straightforward imports like we're building right here, using the user interface is perfectly fine. Now, the next thing we need to do is filter out all file extensions except for text. So I click the drop down. And just like we have filtering over in Excel, I uncheck Select All and check Text. We are telling Power Query to only import text files. Click OK. Now we have our 3 files. If I click, I can, of course, see the text file down here. I don't want any of the other columns here, so I'm going to use my double downward pointing arrow. Now, when I click this, just like in Power Query, it's going to do a bunch of steps for us. When I click, it's first going to ask us, is it OK to use the first file and use the first 200 records to estimate the code it's going to build for the rest of the files. Now, for us, the format and structure of all the files is the same, so that is fine. You can say what file origin and what delimiter. It got it right. It got tab delimited. Now I'm going to come over and click OK. And behind the scenes, it's writing a lot of code. If we look over here on the left, the sample file, that was the first file that it used. It actually wrote some code. Here's the end result. It then transformed that code into a function that the editor can use over and over on each one of the text files in that Start folder to help it import and combine all those files into a single table. Over here, there's the dProduct from before, but here's all sales tables combined. Over here on the right, there's the name. And here's all of the steps. And here's our new combined table. Date, product ID, category, units, revenue, cost of goods sold, and profit. It looks like it got each one of the data types correct. There's an icon that means date. If you needed to change it, we could change it here, but that is correct. Text, whole number, and decimal. Now, you could change from decimal, which is 15 digits. You could actually change it to fixed decimal. That means it will give us the dollar amount and up to 4 fixed decimals. It's fine that we have decimal for these columns. I'm going to click Revenue. Now we can go up, drop down, Close, and Apply. And this will create our table here in Power BI Desktop. And there we go. We're still in Report View over here. There's the table. I can click the drop down, Those are fields that we can drag and drop. Over here in Table View, there's one table. That's our product table. I can come over and click on All Sales. And there's our column, Date, Product ID, Category, Units, Revenue, Cost of Goods Sold, and Profit. But wait a second. Look at that. We forgot to clean our data. We need to split by this delimiter into two columns. No problem. We can go back up to Home, External Data, Edit Queries. Edit Queries. I'm going to select the All Sales Table to Combine. We can select Product ID Category. And notice it's going to add a new step at the bottom with the column selected. Home, over to the Split or Transform. There's Split, or simply right-click. Split, and we want to split by a delimiter. It already picked up the /. I want to do at each occurrence. Click OK. Now we need to rename the column, so I'm going to double click and call this one just Category. Double click. Call this one just Product ID. When I hit Enter, and when I look over here, it's added 3 new steps: Split, Change Type, and Rename Columns. Now when I go to Home, Close, and Apply, just click the button. There we have our 2 columns. Now, if we go over and look at relationships, we have 2 tables. And look at that. It actually did that automatically. Now, we want to make sure that this is the correct relationship. So I click, and I see Product ID in both. Not only that, but it is a one-to-many. We have a list of product IDs with the product names over here. There's exactly one of each over here. But, of course, we can have many sales for a particular product. Also, this relationship here replaces either VLOOKUP if we were using Excel, or like our last video, we merged these 2 tables. That means with this relationship, I'm allowed to drag the product name down to some report and then drag some number and get a summary report because we have this relationship. Now, we need another table. We need a date table because some of the DAX functions require a date table. We're actually not going to see any of those in this video. But also, the filtering and how the stored data works when we create formulas is much more efficient when we have lookup tables or dimension tables like a date or a product table. Now, I'm going to go over to the Table button, over to the Modeling tab, and I'm going to click New Table. But before we do that, think about this. I need a dynamic date table that is always going to know the max and min date from our sales table. Now, remember, later, we're going to import data from new years. It's no problem. We can use, from New Table, we'll use the Calendar function. And most importantly, we'll use the min function to look through this whole column and figure out what the min date is, and the max function. And that way, we can always create a dynamic calendar or date table based on the dates from our sales table. I'm going to click New Table. Up here in the formula bar, I want to call this DDate. And then we use an equal sign. Now, over in Power Pivot in Excel, when we create DAX formulas like this, an equal sign is for calculated columns, and a colon equal sign is for measures. Over here in Power BI Desktop, they don't mess around with 2 different assignment operators. They simply have an equal sign. Now I want to type CA, and there, if I down arrow, is our calendar table function. It's a table function because it returns a table. Start and end date. Now I'm going to use the min, and then the name of our table is all. And I can see if I use my down arrow, there's the whole table. But I want to look through the whole table, and then in square brackets, date. Now, that's very important. Anytime you use a column in DAX, you want to include the entire table name, and then in square brackets, the field name. Now, that is not actually what I want exactly. And the reason why is I might have a date in the middle of the year, both for the min and max. And some of the important functions require that you have all the days in the year. So watch this. This is sort of like Excel. I'm going to use the date function. exactly like Excel, it requires a year, month, and day. Well, I always need to look at the min and pull out the year. So I'm going to use the year and min function. Now, if I close parentheses on the year, notice the only function here that's not in Excel is calendar, but the rest of these are straight Excel functions. Now I type a comma. And the month, well, if I always want the first, I type a 1, comma. Day, if I always want the first day, I simply type a 1. Now watch this. When I close parentheses on date, that is a dynamic formula there. Date, min, date, year, min, and so on. That will always calculate the first day of the min year. Now I'm going to type a comma, and I need end. I'm going to do a similar construction, date, and then for year, please give me the max. All, I'm going to down arrow to get my date column, close parentheses. I forgot that I want year around max, so I'm going to type year. And then for comma, the month, well, it's always 12, comma. And the day will be 31. Close parentheses on the end date and close parentheses on the calendar function. Now when I hit enter, look at that. Later, when we drop new dates in here, we'll automatically get all the dates for any new years in our sales table. Now I want to add some calculated columns here. Because unlike Excel, where we can have automatic group by month and year, for an efficient data model, whether over in Power Pivot Excel or over here in Power BI Desktop, we need to add whatever extra attributes we want. In our case, we just want month and year so that we can drag and drop those into any visualization we're creating. Now, the first column, I'm going to click New Column. The first column, I'm going to call this month number. Equal sign month. There's our month function. Now we need to get this column in, so it's DD to get to D date table, down arrow to the date column. Now this is a calculated column, so automatically it knows to create a row context. Automatically this formula will be copied down. It will see in each row the given date. So when I hit enter, there's the month number. Now that's not really what we want, because I don't want to see in my report 1 for January, 2 for February, and so on. So we're going to add a new column. And over in Excel, when we want to create from a serial number the actual name of the month, we use the text function. But over here, I'm going to backspace, and we're going to call this month equal sign, and the name of the function is format tab. Exactly the same two arguments. You need the value, which is DD, down arrow to date. That'll create row context, looking at the date in each row, comma. And then the format, just like in Excel, in double quotes, custom number formatting, MMM. That will give us a 3-letter abbreviation. Close double quotes, close parentheses, and enter. Now, if we were to create a visualization using this column, it would sort alphabetically. So April would be first. The reason we have to create a month column is because when we do month name, we need to tell this column to sort by this numeric column. So I come up to Sort in the Modeling tab, drop down and say, please sort by month number. Now this will sort correctly in any report or dashboard we create. We need one more new column. Backspace, and I'm going to call this year equal sign and then year. DD, down arrow to date tab, close parentheses, and enter. So there we've created our date table. Now, if we were over in Excel, we actually wouldn't necessarily have to create a date table. But over here in Power BI Desktop, if we want to add for each month in a given year, we have to create the date table with a unique list of all the days in each one of the years, and then add the extra columns with any attributes we'd like to use in our reports or dashboards. So now we can simply drag year and month, and then we'll drag the sales from the sales table, and we can add sales for each month. We're in the table area over here. We could see there's our date table, product, and all sales table. If I go over to the relationship button, now I can click and drag. and drag it over to create a relationship. One, because there's one of each date over here. To many, we can have many sales on a particular date. Now, this one-to-many relationship replaces VLOOKUP that we used to use in Excel. It replaces the merge action we saw in the last video with Power Query. Not only that, but because we have a one-to-many relationship, we're allowed to drag month and year to some report and then drag something like profit. And instantly we'll have the profit for each month in each year. Not only that, but the underlying columnar database, which holds all the data, is designed to work on big data. And it is required that we have attributes that we want to summarize by, often lookup or dimension tables like these two here, in order for it to work efficiently on big data. In essence, what will happen is if I drag a year or a month to some report, this table is actually filtered down just to the days for that month and year, and that filter flows across this relationship and filters down the huge sales table just to the dates that fit that criteria. That way, the formulas will calculate over a much smaller data set. All right, now we need to save this. We could go up to File and Save As, but the keyboard F12 works over here in Power BI Desktop just like Excel. Now we're going to give this a name, something like WAAPT 2017 Power BI Desktop example. I'm going to save it to the desktop and click Save. All right, so we have our relationships. There's the relationship button. We have our three tables, 1, 2, 3. Now let's go over and create our reports. I'm going to click on Report to get our blank canvas. Now the first report we want, product by year. So we're going to come over here and we can pick from amongst many visualizations. This one right here, matrix. So I'm going to click. It gives us the start of a visualization. Notice rows, columns, values. It looks like a pivot table. I'm going to come over to the dProduct table and drag product down to the row areas, just like a pivot table. Over in Excel, we get a unique list of products. We can expand our table. Now I'm going to go over to the dDate, expand that table, and for year, I'm going to drag that to the columns, kind of looking like a cross-tabulated pivot table. And now from the sales, I want to drag revenue down to values. And just like that, we have our revenue cross-tabulated right there. That's Crested Butte in 2016. Already we see the beauty of visualizations and interactivity over here in Power BI Desktop. I'm going to click off to the side. Now, I would like to also have the percent of column total. For each one of these numbers, I want to take those numbers and divide it by the yearly total for each one of the years. Over in Excel, we'd use Show Values As and say, hey, please give me percent of column total. Well, let's come over and we're going to drag revenue down below values. This is sort of like a pivot table. We see the second revenue there. But over in the values area, I'm going to right-click. And down at the bottom, it says Show Values As. And I'm going to point to percent of column total. And look at that. I'm going to click in the title bar at the top, drag it up into the corner, drag the bottom corner, and we can see our report starting to emerge. There's the revenue. There's percent column total revenue. They even have a smart name there. That is so cool. Now we can format this a bit. Over here, that icon right there is for dragging and dropping fields. This one is to take the roller, the paint roller, and add some paint or some formatting. I can go down to Matrix Style. Style, I'm going to click the drop down and say Bold Header. And there's our bold header. Come down to Grid. And down here, it says Text. I'm going to try to highlight that 8 and type a 10. And that will be OK because we're going to add multiple years later. So just with a few clicks, In our field area and formatting, we have our cross-tabulated product and yearly report, including percentage of revenue for each year. Now we want to come down to the sheet. Just like in Excel, we can double-click, and I'm going to call this Revenue Cross-Tab, and Enter. And there's our cross-tabulated report. I can come and pick any particular year and product, and look at that. It highlights it. Come down over here. 2016, it's highlighted. Come over to the totals, it highlights the whole row for us. If I click over and 100% are off to the side, everything is highlighted. Now we want to create our next visualization, so I'm going to click the plus. Just like in Excel, we can add a new sheet. I'm going to double click and call this Gross Profit Report, and Enter. All right, we're going to have 3 separate visualizations in this dashboard. The first one is we want to come over, we're going to click Matrix again. There's our matrix start. I want to drag Product over to the rows, and we'll drag this down. For each product, we want revenue, cost of goods sold, profit, and then we'll calculate using a measure gross profit percentage. So over here, there's our values. I'm going to drag revenue down to values. Cost of goods sold down to values. Profit down below cost of goods sold. Now, we see that we have our 3 fields, but we don't have gross profit percentage field. Now, we'd like to calculate a formula, and a formula that goes into our visualization and will be based on our condition or criteria from the row header or any of our slicers, or in our case, charts, is called a measure. Now, notice here is the all sales. We have various fields right there. Oops, that's a gross profit percentage that I created earlier. I'm going to delete it, pretend that's not there. Delete. The sigma means those are numbers that you can drag and have the default sum calculation. But we want to add that measure that I just deleted from that table. So we go up to Modeling. And there's our calculations. We've done new table and new column. Now we want a new measure. So I click. Right up in the formula bar, I'm going to backspace and call this gross profit percentage. Equal sign, starts all DAX formulas over here in Power BI Desktop. And I need to take for gross profit percentage, since profit's already calculated, profit is revenue minus cost of goods sold, I need to take profit and divide it in the numerator on top of revenue as the denominator. But I need to do it at the aggregate level, so I need to use the sum function. I cannot put just a column reference like we did over in a column. In a column, it sees row context and knows how to see each row. But in a measure, it doesn't know what to do with just a column. But no problem. What we want is the sum of our profit and then divide it by the sum of the revenue. So I'm going to type ALL, down arrow to get our column tab, close parentheses. So we have our aggregate calculation adding for each criteria in each row in this report. And now we're going to divide it by the sum, ALL, down arrow to revenue, tab, close parentheses. Now I want to add some formatting to that measure, and I'm going to add the percent button. That's different in Excel. When I click it here, it'll add percent with 2 decimals. Over here, we see our gross profit percentage. I'm going to click and drag down below profit, and there is our measure calculating gross profit. Now we can come over, and in the format area, matrix style, you can pick which one you'd like. You could try something like bold header with flashy rows if you wanted. That's not the one I want. Maybe alternating rows for this one. Over to grid. I'm going to change the font again to 10. Change the width here. Now I want to create a bar chart. So I'm going to click in the white, come over here and click on clustered bar, then drag product over to axis, and then profit. I want profit down in values. And just like that, I can expand. And there's our bar chart. We're actually going to use it as a slicer. We're going to click and it's going to affect our visualization over here. Just as in Excel, we can add data labels and then get rid of our axis. So I'm going to come up to Formatting. And there it is, Data Labels. I'm simply going to click On. Once we have data labels here, this becomes mostly chart junk down here. So I'm going to come up to X-axis and click Turn that off. I would like, under Data Labels again, Position. I don't want auto, I want inside end. Again, that's a feature just like over in Excel. Now I want to click down in the white, come over and select Clustered Column. And I'm going to drag Category. Normally, we probably would have Category as an attribute in product, but our table wasn't set up that way. It came as one of the fields in our sales table, but nevertheless, I'm going to drag it to the axis. And I can see that our column is over there, so I'm going to drag it. And now I'm going to drag the same profit down to values. Now I can resize this. I want to make this pretty wide. I want to do the same thing, come up to the Format. Data labels are going to be on. Click Data Labels. And I want to select the same thing, Position, Inside End. Now we want to see how this works. If I click on, for example, Advanced, look at that over here. This is being filtered, and so is this. They're all connected. Now, I would like to sort. So here in this bar chart, I want the biggest one on top. So I'm going to come, actually, let's click in the white to unfilter everything. Then we come up to these little dots, and there it is, Sort by Profit. So there we have biggest to smallest. Now I can try this again. There's my intermediate. I see the products up here, and I see the detailed numbers over here. I click in the white, and everything is unfiltered. Now, actually, if you look back to the start of the video, you notice I didn't add category over here. And the reason why is I started this video, and in the middle of the video, I clicked the Update button for the July update, because every month they updated it, and they completely changed how the matrix works. Now, I actually went and read the article they wrote, and I could not figure how to get category and product, which means if we click on this visualization here and go over to the field area, I couldn't figure out how to drag two fields down in the row areas like we can do in pivot tables. But that's something we have to live with. If anyone knows how to do it with the new matrix update, please post a comment below. But there you go. There's our revenue and cross-tabulated report using Power BI Desktop. Click in the white, and our gross profit report where we can click our chart and have everything filtered. That's pretty amazing. Now, our last step, of course, is we want to update the new data. If we go over here to Revenue Crosstab, this report will expand to show us 2018 and 19. Let's go over to Windows Explorer. Over here in Windows Explorer, there's our folder. I'm going to double-click. Remember, if I double-click Start, we only have up to 2017. I'm going to hit the back button. Add later, I'm going to double-click, and I'm going to select Sales 2018. Hold Control, click Sales 2019. I've highlighted two items not next to each other. Control-C to copy. Back arrow, double-click Start, and Control-V. Now remember, if I back arrow, Power BI Desktop is pointing to that Start folder. So when I come back over to Power BI Desktop, go over to Home and click Refresh, it's going to run through the query, the import, all of those steps, and update our report. And look at that. It is a little wide here. We could drag this, and it doesn't quite fit. So I'm going to go back over to Formatting, down to Grid, and say Text, how about 9 and Enter? That didn't work either. So how about backspace 8 and Enter? But look at that. It is totally updated. I want to highlight the entire fun fly for all 5 years. There we go. Come back over to our gross profit report, and all of the numbers are updated. Hey, let's sort this too. I'm going to sort this. Click the dot, dot, dot. Sort by profit. So there we get the biggest here and here. Click on Beginner. There's all the detailed numbers. There's the visualization just for those beginner products, and there is the total. That is pretty amazing. Power BI Desktop to use get data, which is very similar to Power Query over in Excel. We were able to import, clean, and transform our data. We were able over in modeling to use new table, new column, and measure to create 3 different types of formulas. We ended up with 3 different tables over here in our table view. Over in relationship, we created our relationship. And then back over in report view, we created 2 reports. All right, that's just a basic introduction of Power BI Desktop. If you like that video, click that thumbs up, leave a comment, and sub, and we'll see you next video.